Hermione's Song, Chapter 8. Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry.
"Where and when the hell have you been?"
Ace demanded from her foster father. "Here and then. You know me. Always on the move," the doctor replied, trying his hand at a bit of levity. The fact that he had been knocked on his butt made it a bit harder to make light of the situation. From the angry glare he got from Ace, she obviously didn't like his answer. "I still get these things mixed up," he admitted. Was humor not the right response? He asked no one in particular. Ace took another step forward and kicked the doctor in the shin while he sat on the ground, her black robe flapping. "Ouch!" the doctor yelled, trying to scoot back with his hands. She kicked him in the other leg for his troubles. "Ouch! That hurts! Lay off, Ace!" he pleaded. Hermione couldn't just stand by and watch the doctor get abused. Glancing over at Harry, he met her eyes and nodded, silently agreeing to help. Their expressions stern, they both stepped forward to help protect their new friend. Ace, catching the movement out of the corner of her eye, turned to face him, smiling sweetly.
"It's okay. We're family,"
she said, as if that explained everything. Ron put a restraining hand on Harry and Hermione's shoulders to keep them from going any farther. "Leave her to it. Never interfere in a family squabble," he suggested, drawing upon years of growing up in the Burrow. Hermione wasn't quite convinced yet.
"What's he done to upset you so?"
she demanded from Ace.
"Well, for starters, he hasn't contacted me in over 6 years."
Ace replied, glaring at the doctor.
6 years and no contact whatsoever. Not even a single postcard.
She snarled. The doctor decided that perhaps he should wait until she was out of striking distance to tell her it had been over 200 years from his perspective.
"I can understand not writing or popping over for tea, but considering where you live, you could at least have made a bloody phone call," she screamed at him.
Ron tried to imagine what one of his siblings would do to him if he lost contact with him for even a month. He shuddered at the images it brought to mind. "You've definitely got this one coming, mate," he told the doctor. "Ginny would have given me a black eye by now, and I don't want to think about what Fred and George would do to me," he mused. "I even keep in contact with that Ponce Percy," he offered, shrugging. Hermione frowned down at the doctor. She was the only child of 2 only children. Both sets of grandparents had passed away before her birth, so her family was much, much smaller than Ron's. That being said, she still couldn't imagine going for more than a week between outposts with her parents.
"I hate to admit it, Doctor, but for once Ron actually has a valid point,"
she told him. "Thanks. Wait, what do you mean, for once?" Ron demanded, stumbling over himself, realizing that he'd just been insulted. Professor Dumbledore stepped out in front of the students, spreading his arms wide. "Perhaps we should leave our guests alone for a bit," he suggested, shooing the students towards the arched stone entryway leading into the castle. The Gryffindors allowed themselves to be shepherded away from the 2 strange wizards. Even though she let herself be led away, and despite her earlier words, Hermione glanced over her shoulder to assure herself that the doctor wasn't going to be hurt too badly. He met her eyes and gave her a quick wink to let her know he was going to be all right. Ace was watching the byplay between Hermione and the doctor, sizing up how the pair interacted.
"Must be the newest model,"
she thought, allowing herself a small grin. As the students walked away, she studied Harry's retreating form. Ace had misled Professor Dumbledore, more out of instinct than anything else. She'd known right from the start who Harry was. He looked far too much like his father to be anyone else. After the students and Dumbledore were out of sight, Ace offered the doctor her hand, helping him up. He gingerly took it, keeping an eye out for any surprise left hooks to his substantial chin. When the blow didn't come, he took the young woman he thought of as his daughter and pulled her into a hug. Ace was still for a moment, her head resting on his chest. She luxuriated in an embrace she hadn't felt in years. The doctor was the one to step back first. He looked at Ace, his mind full of questions. The first one out of his mouth was, "When did you become so short?" Ace punched him in the arm.
"I'm the same size, Professor. You're the one who's gotten taller,"
she reminded him. She hesitated before asking the next question.
"How many times, have you changed?"
she asked, darting her eyes around to see if anyone was within earshot. The doctor looked at his shoes, feeling too guilty to look Ace in the eyes. 4 times, he muttered softly. Ace's eyes widened in shock.
4?
She stammered.
How long's it been since you last saw me?
She asked in a whisper. Judging her range, the doctor took a couple of steps backwards. Somewhere in the neighborhood of 200 years, he admitted. He threw up his arms in front of his face to block any incoming blows. When none came, he peeked around his arms.
What happened?
Was all Ace managed to whimper. The doctor sighed wearily. I'll tell you what I can someday. I promise. But right now isn't the best time for that, he replied sadly. He paused. His eyes narrowed, pointing an accusing finger at her. Instead, how about you explain how you came about being a witch? He demanded. Ace again looked around to make sure no one was listening in on their conversation. She took the doctor's arm and led him away from the darkened, echoing halls of the castle.
Yeah, about that.
She whispered, grinning sheepishly.
I'm not really a witch. I haven't a drop of magical talent anywhere in me,
she admitted. Huh? More concise words failing to come from the well-spoken alien's befuddled lips. He shook his head to organize his thoughts. I'm pretty sure someone working for the Prime Minister as an Auror should have at least some magical talent. Everyone around here is pretty much in awe over the Black Cats and their abilities. I might be too if I had the foggiest idea as to what those abilities might be, he told her. Ace ran her hand through her hair, a gesture she had adopted from the doctor.
Probably the easiest way to explain things is to start at the beginning,
she suggested. No, never really bothered me not to start at the beginning, the doctor interjected, shrugging. Ace rolled her eyes.
Yeah, I remember. I also remember how it always annoyed me to no end as well,
she added sourly. Her eyes became slightly unfocused as she dug into her memories, dredging up to the forefront of her mind how her path had led to this moment.
The Daleks had stepped up their attacks on human settlements, and I was recalled back to Space Fleet. They assigned me as a leader of a special strike team. I guess they still liked the finesse I displayed blowing up the dome-top bastards,
she said, grinning at the memory.
The Daleks had amassed a huge fleet, and we were put on the defensive almost immediately. Things went from bad to worse, and eventually my team was pinned down on some backwater planet, with no backup and dwindling ammo,
she explained.
Suddenly the Daleks pulled back and just disappeared. We spent nearly a year looking for any trace of the damned salt shakers, with no results. With the enemy gone, my team was disbanded, and I decided to head back to Earth for a nice vacation. I chose to return at around the time I got sucked up in that time storm, just before I met you,
she reminisced.
I sort of overshot and ended up in 1978,
she admitted. They found a gray stone wall about 3 feet high that was perfect to sit on. It led from Hagrid's cabin to a deep, dark forest. Ace continued her story as they sat down.
My first night back on Earth, I was jumped by a stray weevil,
she said in disgust.
After I finished mopping up the alleyway with its ugly face, I heard someone clapping behind me. Some handsome bloke in a long blue trench coat introduced himself and offered me a job. And a quick tumble,
she explained, blushing. Is there anyone Jack hasn't tried to shag on this blasted island? The doctor fumed. Ace chuckled and looked up as if she were trying to do a complex equation in her head.
I'm sure there are at least 5 people he hasn't met yet,
she joked.
Just so you know, I didn't sleep with him,
she assured the doctor. Really? The doctor asked, truly surprised.
Yes. Really?
Ace replied, not amused.
Now can I continue with my story, or are you going to drill me on my sex life?
She demanded. It was the doctor's turn to blush as he motioned for her to continue.
Jack explained who he worked for, and I decided Torchwood sounded like a good gig. When I finished orientation, I was assigned to Torchwood 4,
she went on.
Jack contacted me one night and said he wanted to share some intel with me. He said that one of his contacts warned him about a civil war in the magical community that was threatening to spill over into normal society,
she said.
We decided that we needed to infiltrate their world and see what we could do to minimize loss of life,
she explained.
Captain Jack, the con man that he once was, came up with the idea of the Black Cats,
she said, beaming proudly.
The real reason why no one in the magical community can remember us growing up and going to school with them is that we were never really there in the first place,
she chuckled. So, the Prime Minister knows you aren't really witches and wizards, the doctor stated for clarification.
Not really. Jack and I hacked the primitive computers and added a new branch of security forces that answered to the PM. They just don't know that all requests for black cats gets routed through either Jack's or my computer.
Ace replied.
We figured the less a politician knows, the better.
She stated.
I was the first agent to go in undercover, and I wasn't prepared for what ended up happening.
She told him. Did you get hurt? The doctor asked, worried for his foster daughter. Ace looked away and then up at the castle.
Only my heart,
She replied.
I fell in love with a wizard.
She explained.
His name was Sirius Black, and we dated for almost 2 years before everything came crashing down in one horrible night.
She said sadly. The doctor silently took her hand in his and waited patiently for her to continue.
Sirius and I found out that our good friends Lily and James had been murdered in their home. Harry was Sirius' godson, so we set off immediately to see if he'd survived. We took the time hopper because it was faster than his broom, and Sirius was too tired from fighting to apparate us both there.
She told him.
A pack of Death Eaters had been laying in wait for us over London and attacked us. Blasting curse hit the hopper directly in the time core, causing it to explode.
She said, tears starting to form at the corners of her eyes.
I woke up in Cardiff a couple of months ago. I guess the blast must have shoved me into the rift and sent me forward in time 16 years.
She speculated.
I looked for Sirius and found that he had been falsely accused of James and Lily's murder and sentenced to life in prison. He escaped, but was killed less than a month before I returned.
She sobbed, tears flowing freely. The doctor held Ace until her crying stopped, pulling out a purple handkerchief and offering it to her. I'm truly sorry, Ace, he whispered into her hair, meaning every word. What I still don't understand is how you managed to pass as a witch, he told her. Ace smirked and pulled out an ordinary-looking wand from a holster on her side and handed it over to the doctor.
Clark's Law,
She said simply, pressing a hidden stud on the wand. The sides split to reveal a mass of nanites that were way beyond anything that was currently available on Earth.
Jack and I cheated a bit and brought in some outside contractors.
She admitted. Ace took the wand back and resealed the sides. She leveled it at a rock not far from the wall and pressed a different hidden stud. A brilliant green flash shot out from the tip of the wand and vaporized her target. Ace wasn't sure, but she thought she might have heard a shrill screech right before the rock was destroyed. The doctor winced at the death of the little creature that had been stalking him earlier. The thought of what the creature had intended to do to him and the students made him feel a little better.
Okay, your turn. How did you end up in the here and now?
Ace inquired. The doctor shifted uncomfortably. I was looking for the child of some friends of mine and ran into a spot of trouble and... he began, not sure he wanted to finish the sentence. Ace deflated and put her head in her hands.
You crashed the TARDIS again, didn't you?
She moaned, pretty sure she already knew the answer. The doctor jumped off the stone wall, looking offended. Hold on! I'll have you know, I was caught in a vortex storm and... He started, and then sat back down suddenly. Yes, I crashed the TARDIS again, he admitted with a slight pout. Ace hugged the doctor tightly.
I'm glad to see there are still some things about you that never change.
She chuckled.